Coming up on Leading the Charge.
Now when we're on site, we have all these data points coming in, right? Not just kind of what our equipment's doing, but what everyone else's equipment is doing down the line. So now you can really monitor, from utility all the way down to a 120 volt plug to see, what's going on in that whole kind of ecosystem of power.
This is Leading the Charge, where we talk innovation and insights in the industry of sustainable energy. Leading the Charge is brought to you by POWR2, a global provider of energy storage solutions. Let's simplify sustainability. And now, from the POWR2 studio and broadcasting everywhere from leadingthecharge.io, here are your hosts, Tim Doling and Kevin Sturmer. Welcome to Leading the Charge, where we talk battery energy storage insights, innovation, and the industry of sustainable energy. My name is Kevin, and I work in the marketing department of a company called POWR2. And with us, as always, is our incredible co-host, Tim Doling. He's the Director of Innovation here at POWR2. How are you doing, Tim?
Doing great, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing well. Very excited for today's episode because we're taking a closer look at powering large-scale live events, and we're lucky enough to have Josh Mosko with us on the podcast. Now, he's the Vice President of Business Development for CES. He has 20 years plus in the rental industry with companies including United Rentals, Herc, Lodgimove. Josh, how are you, and welcome to the podcast.
Excellent. I'm doing great. Thanks, Kevin. Tim, good to see you guys, and look forward to chatting and all things sustainability and live events and any other exciting topics we come across. So, yeah.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be great. So, but before we get to live events, you have such a fascinating story. Can you describe a little bit of your journey to sustainability, powering live events in the rental industry? Because it's an incredible path that got you here.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I think like a lot of folks, you don't know what your path is going to be and things kind of veer around a bit. But I've been fortunate enough to, like you said, work for a lot of major rental companies. I've worked on the manufacturing side in the space for generators. I've worked on the dealer side. So a lot of different kind of avenues to understand kind of all the nuances of the industry. I've worked in industrial. I've worked in pretty much every market segment you can think of between oil and gas and utility and emergency response, government, you name it, and obviously live events. So it's come full circle for me. I started out in live events 20 plus years ago, as you mentioned. Makes me sound a little dated, but I'll go with it for now. But and then, full circle, obviously with CES, and it's a big portion of what we do today, but not the only thing we do, and kind of get into that. But yeah, I mean, throughout time, obviously, we've really tried to, as an industry, kind of grow up in terms of more data, IoT, telematics, monitoring power, really have an understanding of, what the applications are doing and trying to maximize and all sorts of efficiencies. So it's really always been kind of in our minds, right? But I think obviously the last several years, it's a lot about technology and alternative kind of uses, whether it's battery or, different sources, right, from that standpoint. So we're starting to get more traction, obviously, as you guys are, and it's really coming to the forefront. So exciting times, and obviously in Europe and other places, they may be even a little more ahead of the curve than we are in the US. So globally, it's obviously a big thing in our industry.
Great to hear. And you mentioned that CES has, it does live events, but also some other things. Can you kind of give us a quick overview of the kind of projects that CES will work on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we have kind of a different segments that we kind of look at, right? We have our kind of core business with power and HVAC equipment. We've gotten into technologies as well. We have a division that does technology, so Wi-Fi and networking. Along with that, we have some software. So really getting into kind of the, infrastructure space, as we like to call it, right, for all things bundled solution. Outside of power and HVAC, we have a lot of equipment, distribution, type of equipment, accessories that really complement it, right? So there's a lot outside of just the big assets that you see to really kind of engineer a solution for all these type of jobs.
Yep. And then what kind of percentage in switch are you seeing? Because a lot of equipment these days, and we went to ARA, a few months ago, and it's a transition to a lot of electrical equipment on site and powering those in different ways. So this sort of switch to a more sustainable or a more eco-friendly solution. What are you seeing from your clients or customers?
We're definitely seeing that transition, right? I think in certain categories, more than others, right? In terms of, costs and different applications, whether it's long-term or short-term, there's obviously a lot of variables that maybe, we get traction, more with electrifying equipment, right? But we're definitely seeing that and really exploring different applications where we can tie in more, battery powered equipment and really hybridize it as well with some engine driven equipment. So lots of efficiencies. And again, everyone's kind of got goals to look at in terms of our clients and overall, and we're all trying to obviously move the industry forward and be sustainable at the same time. So I would say that's part of it. I would say the other part of it for us is going back to the value engineering. We look at how can we distribute power around a site and maximize that so we have less engine driven equipment. We could put batteries in specific places, but really how can we minimize that? Because we look at it from a logistics standpoint as well, right? We're moving a lot of trucks potentially into some of these different events and sites. So we want to minimize that as well. So, the more we could, fit on a truck, and obviously cable and distribution takes up a lot less space. So we really look at as an engineering a project. And, for us too, I guess the other thing to point out is a lot of venues and different sites, we've worked on in the past, right? So we kind of know the lay of the land a bit. 80% of our business is recurring. So we have this kind of tribal knowledge of all these sites and what works well. And, every year we can kind of improve on that.
So if we look back over time, Josh, you just talked a little bit about the present, but if we look back over time, you started in this back in 1999, 2000. And you mentioned that was immediately in the event sector. I guess that was with one of the other multinationals or consolidators. Was there ever any talk about sustainability back then, or was there ever even a battery system available back then?
Yeah, no, I mean, there wasn't really anything in terms of a battery back then that we came across, right? But, we did started to get into some biofuel and things of that nature at some point, right? So we saw a little bit of it, and it didn't really get a lot of traction at that point. So, there were some early things, and then obviously we got into telemetry and other, data monitoring to really kind of right size the loads. And as engines and EPA came more online, it became more important, right, that we had the right equipment for the right application. So again, there were some things that we were doing that we weren't really necessarily 100% focused on sustainability, but it was ultimately part of what we were trying to accomplish, just to provide a better service to our customers and just be more efficient.
Yeah, so interesting. I guess, for me, the first time I started to see this focus on sustainability was back in the oil field boom. I think it's like 2012 kind of time. And because there was wellhead gas available, people were looking at converting diesel engines to dual fuel engines that they could run off methane or diesel. So there was that kind of push at that time. And that was the start of it. And then I didn't really see batteries until probably 2015, 2016 is when I first started seeing it. So there's that long lapse between when these event rental companies started operating and when we started making the transition. I don't know if that fits with what you've seen.
Yeah, no, I agree. We saw the same thing at one point, right? And then natural gas generators started to come online, around that time. And then I would say for us, I remember a project in 2010 timeframe with the utility company. So that was really my first entree into batteries. We were talking about, large scale, megawatt, 2 megawatt battery systems for utility. And that was really the first entree, and it was super expensive, right? So that was part of the initial challenge. We were talking multi-million dollars to produce something like that. So that was really the first experience. But, you look back and see that, okay, we've come a long way from there. Costs have gone down, technology, the weight, all the things that, kind of prevented it from getting traction. So it's an interesting, I would say, over the last 15 years is really from kind of the birth in our industry to kind of where it's at today.
Yeah, it wasn't unknown in the industry. I remember going down to a fairly small generator company in the DC, Maryland area, Actually, they've since been acquired by Herc, but they showed me a battery that they'd been making for years that they used to power up these live political events with. So just where a politician would go out and give a speech for a limited period of time, they could wheel a battery out there and power that. So that was like one of the very first portable battery energy storage systems I had seen, and it was the size of a large suitcase. So pretty cool to see how it's evolved from that to what we have today in like the multi-megawatt scale. And sorry, Kevin, I'm taking over for you for a second.
It's great to hear. I love these stories. It's always a good thing to hear. And the one thing, sort of, you mentioned telemetry, Josh, and that was one of the things that popped up as we were, doing some research was all of the innovation and the way you kept driving, especially when it came to data-driven decisions and optimizing equipment or optimizing a process, for example, with the rental and return process and getting AI involved and looking at the data. Now that we've had these batteries around for almost a decade, where do you see that headed?
Yeah, I think back to your point on telemetry and what we discussed, I mean, what we've tried to do is really take that data. We've bought a software company. We bought a couple of Wi-Fi and networking companies. So now when we're on site, we have all these data points coming in, right? Not just kind of what our equipment's doing, but what everyone else's equipment is doing down the line. So now you can really monitor, from utility all the way down to a 120 volt plug to see, what's going on in that whole kind of ecosystem of power. So that to us is super important. And then, layering in all sorts of things in terms of, like you mentioned, AI, all sorts of other factors, weather, interactive mapping. We have drones that we fly to look and kind of overlay and really understand the site, cable runs, all sorts of things. So it's really, technology, I think, is a big driver, right? And we've tried to always stay on the forefront of that, and really we want to be a leader in that because that data is powerful only if it's actionable, right? I think that's a thing we see in our industry a lot too. You have all this data coming in, but then what do you do with it, right? So, it's really taking that data and making it actionable, between the equipment and the workforce and kind of merging that technology. So harnessing that is really a big part of the future. And I know you guys see with batteries, with the software and, segue into sustainability reporting. Because again, it's one thing to kind of be able to produce and engineer and lay out a job, but if you can really then benchmark it, have reporting, and you can learn obviously how to get better, where you're at today and where you're trying to go. So those are all things that we think about on every job continuously, and that's what gets us excited too, right? And the more we work with our partners, like yourselves, the manufacturing side, we think we can, move this thing along and expedite things in the industry.
For sure. So I was going to ask you a follow-up on the data side. So that's super interesting, useful data that you're getting from these live events. Is that data primarily used yourself to optimize your running of the events, or is it stuff you share with the customer so they can see, how you're improving things, or is it a combination of both? I guess I'm asking because there's a cost associated with capturing lots of data and transferring it into or bringing it into a usable package, if you will. So is that primarily for you or for your customer?
Definitely for both. I think, it goes back to the partnership thing. We want to be partners with our customers. We are partners with our customers. Typically, we have a long history with a lot of our customers. So we want to be fully transparent. And, sometimes that may mean, less generators, more cable and distro, but, whatever that is, it's all about kind of that transparency of what we see there from the data. And again, getting better every time, every year, depends how often the event is or the project. So, it only makes sense to really be transparent with the data and then, figure out, how do we get better? What worked really well, really do a postmortem on the job. So I think that's super important, this transparency between, OEM and rental companies and, everyone in between, right?
Absolutely. When it comes to offering a battery or sustainable solutions to these event organizers, is that being driven by you as a company providing it as a better solution, or is it being requested by them as something that meets their sustainability goals? Or do you see a combination?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, right? it goes back to engineering the job and, knowing the scope and the requirements and all those things. So we see it all ways, right? We're working on some large scale mega projects now where it's spec'd. I mean, massive amount of batteries, right? So we're seeing that now. And then obviously we also have conversations on, what can we do, for this particular job and activations. And obviously there's a lot of people involved, right? You have kind of some of the operations folks, in the live event space, we have sponsors and kind of VIP and, different kind of opportunities within these live events where we can have different activations. So a lot of it is kind of a brainstorming session at times to figure out placement and what makes sense, right? If we're going to take on certain things on a project, we can kind of have discussions on what makes sense, right? There's obviously a lot of logistics involved and, various things that we want to make sure that we're capturing, right? But it's definitely a team kind of effort. But to answer your question, yeah, we see it come in all different ways, which is good, right? From the corporate side, sustainability goals, down to certain cities that we partake in, right? Certain cities, obviously we know California in the US, but, whether it's in London or Madrid or different places, some people have, more stringent regulations too. So, we're seeing a lot of different reasons why it's, becoming more applicable.
Yeah, which gives you a very unique perspective, given that you're a global company, you work in all these different countries all over the world. Is there any particular country that you've seen pushes this more than another, or is it starting to gain global adoption?
Yeah, I think, you're seeing certain cities that are, taking action, right? And I think, a lot of times it's kind of a phase-in approach because you can't just tell people to convert their fleet overnight. We do a lot of concert touring as well globally, right? So we're touring around, city to city, right? So you can see one city to the next, what's going on. And as I mentioned before, biofuel in Europe, HVO fuel is a little more prevalent too, which is more sustainable fuel source. So you're seeing certain cities that are really pushing, their stage 5 over there, right? It's part of it, and batteries and certain things. So it's really interesting. Like I mentioned, London and Madrid is a couple examples, but we're definitely seeing it more and more, and it's starting to kind of gain traction.
Yeah, so interesting. And I think the other thing is that I've talked to a lot of people now in the event sector. I met up with a guy you probably know, Paul Schurink, in Miami recently at an event, and he was saying it's not just the sustainability side, it's the fact that batteries sometimes, in the right application, is a better solution. So we get a lot of people that are worried about investing in batteries, thinking that if political tides change, there may not be the demand. But I don't think it's just the sustainability side now. It's the reliability and the pure power that you get from a battery inverter combination that it just can be, in the right application, better than a diesel generator.
Totally agree. Had an application yesterday with a crane application, more on the industrial side, but definitely with kind of the motor load and basically that application, it makes a lot of sense from a sizing perspective with the battery versus a traditional genset. So,
absolutely,
perfect example there.
I think it comes down to trust as well, where it's adoption of any new technology is going to be difficult unless somebody can say, hey, this is going to work the same or better. Are you having to guide them, educate more, or do people already kind of come in knowing what they want out of a sustainable solution?
There's definitely an education piece, right? Like you said, any new technology, I think there's education. There has to be kind of a trust factor that the equipment's going to work, right? And that's where we need to really come in and make sure and battle test equipment and, make sure for the applications it's kind of the right equipment. So, yeah, I think there's kind of a combination of things that, kind of gets us into, more and more battery storage and traction with certain clients. And then obviously, again, the data, we have certain clients that, we look at, we send reports, and we really have discussions about it in terms of, the efficiency, right? The efficiency of how they're running the equipment and obviously their fuel costs and all those things. And that becomes a financial calculation in a way, right? So there's kind of this financial piece of it, and then there's sustainability and, kind of company goals and various things. So those are really kind of two main things that I think every company's slightly different in terms of how they view things. From a global perspective, some places fuel is very expensive. Even in the US, obviously California, fuel is much more expensive than a lot of states. So that plays into the financial calculation. A lot of businesses are for profit and looking to make money. So there's that financial piece, and then there's that sustainability. And like we talked about before, the right application, battery might even be better than a traditional genset. So I think there's, again, a lot of factors, and that education is always imperative, right? In terms of getting a comfort level and really looking at how that will work for the application. And, again, for us, everything from broadcast, to a small little activation for media or catering or whatever it is, everyone is going to be different on how mission critical it is.
Yeah, I was just going to add that reliability is huge. I just remember one of the first clients I was calling on, a large construction company way back in 2020. He says, it looks great, but does it work? And I guess that's the key question when people are looking at technology for the first time. Okay, it's cool, but does it do what you say it's going to do? Does it actually work? And now with 6-7 years of data behind us, we can actually hang our hat on and say, yes, it does work. But you have to get the right application. It has to be sized right for the job. The worst thing you can do with this technology is to oversell it. But you just put it into the right application, it works perfectly.
I do have a follow-up question to that. So each job, as we've kind of been talking about, is different. How do you choose between diesel or between hydrogen fuel cell or solar, or what drives that decision from a lot of the project factors?
Just like anything, different manufacturers have different products, and whether certain units can parallel, do they have multi-voltage? There's a lot of factors that we look at, right? And in terms of looking at how long a duration is this activation, right? So if it's a weekend versus, 1 year type of project, that really may kind of sway things in terms of what we're going to use and how we use it. Microgrids for us, right? We've done those implementations and, works really well, right? You have a place where you get a lot of sun, you're able to use a solar, it's able to charge the equipment, but again, a lot of factors to engineer that to say, this is the best solution. You need the right amount of real estate, all the things that come into play. So again, it's really that engineered solution, but even down to the products, which products are we going to use? Do they parallel together? Do we need a transformer? How do we run the distribution? So a lot of factors, again, from a fleet owner standpoint of how we can use stuff that provides the best overall solution. And then back to everything we've been talking about with power monitoring and really benchmarking and really understanding what the load and application is. So it's never really a straightforward answer from that standpoint, but I think those are important pieces because just like anything else, all batteries aren't created equal. I'm sure you guys compare yourselves to other manufacturers and certain features and benefits that maybe some others don't have. So, that's important for us too, right? As we think about buying fleet, standardizing, globally, all these different things, there's definitely some nuances from a power perspective.
Absolutely. I guess at the most basic level, operation, it comes down to the availability of equipment and availability of the fuel. So if you're talking about hydrogen, big problem right now in the US is there's not a network of hydrogen to refill those hydrogen generators. So how do you effectively make that work on a site or on an event? And then if you want to talk about solar, do you have the physical space to put a solar array out there? So Josh, do you have any stores with solar? Have you managed to successfully deploy solar at all?
Yeah, we have. It's like you said, basically based on all those factors. We've had some applications that work really well, depending on the length and the duration and running through all the calculations, right? We have some pretty advanced calculations where we can, spit out some stuff in terms of time of year and location and, power draw and, various things, obviously on the solar side, and really look at the benefit of adding it. So I think more and more, again, as the technology gets better, solar panels and different ways to use them and the flexible solar panels and, all sorts of different ways that we can use them. It's going to become more prevalent, right? We have them on trailers and, different things we have on some of our existing trailers that we use for film and studio and Wi-Fi networking. We have solar on them. So it's definitely, that's shifted. We've seen that shift the last few years, and that's a whole nother segment, right? Film and TV that's, I think, getting some traction with a lot of the studios. Obviously very unique in terms of their production and how they utilize power from day to day and on set and studio and all sorts of things. But we see that as a market that's been growing from a battery and sustainability standpoint. So
the stories I love to hear because it's such a varied clientele between, as you said, film and TV to sporting events, to motorsports, football, those kinds of things, to live concerts. And I think back to my days, I was an intern at a radio station and they were doing one of those summer jam events and the writers coming in from those different, performers, everything. Things that you just can't talk about, but to like a six-pack of root beer, for example, they were very specific. I actually had that one, but I'm curious, were there any specific requests that came in that really stood out for you as unique, but you were able to deliver on those as a power solution?
Yeah, well, first off, I think you have a good radio voice, Kevin. I think that's I think you have that voice for radio. It's pretty good. Right?
Thank you.
So,
Did you guys go to the same school, or
no,
is there a story there?
No, we did not go to the same school. No.
No, I thought there was something up in Connecticut there. Or...
No. I had another life in theater. I spent about 15 years in market research, but prior to that, another life in theater, and actually proposed to my wife on the stage where Josh spent some of his school time. So
that's what it was. Okay. Yeah.
There is
two stories crossed over there.
Yeah, definitely a connection there. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, there's definitely some, unique scenarios that we run across, right, in terms of, what customers are looking to accomplish. And sometimes that may evolve, right? They may have one idea. This is kind of the idea. And then we go through kind of the scenarios and it slightly gets adjusted, right? So when you ask the question, I start thinking about some unique projects that are logistically very challenging, right? Where you have to fly equipment in planes and, and you got all sorts of, you got helicopters placing equipment and all sorts of things. So how we can engineer that. And, there's some of these that have some advanced notice, right? Where, a lot of times in our industry, everything's last minute. I need it next week. I need it tomorrow. I need it yesterday. It's emergency response. But, some of these larger projects, you have some time to really engineer it and really come up with the best solution and, make sure, you're covered on all the logistics and all those things. So those are unique and fun at the same time. And, and we're coming across more and more of those. So it's exciting.
Yep. And that kind of leads us into how we end each episode. We have answered questions by Tim, but I'm going to open this one up to you as well, Josh. They usually come from our audience, and if you have a question that you'd like to submit, you can send an email to leadingthecharge@power2.com. Now, the question actually comes from Ashley, and what kind of triggered my brain was that you mentioned that you possibly fly equipment out or go to these sort of distant locations. Live events, when things happen live, I know if anybody's ever been on stage or public speaking, you always expect something to go wrong. So how do you plan for the unexpected when it comes to powering a live event sustainably?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I think, we kind of live that every day, right? I mean, there's always changes up until, right? And even after, right, is the event's going on. So we typically have some additional equipment that we have in a boneyard or something, right? And we do everything we can to make sure that, that nothing obviously goes down without kind of a backup or another plan in place. So, it's really a combination between the people and equipment to really right size the job and, knowing that there are going to be changes. So, we have, different ways to make sure that we deliver power reliably, right? So we have project management on every site. And for us, right, it's probably a little different than a lot of rental companies out there. We provide a turnkey solution. So that means we always have people kind of setting up, operating, dismantle. So we have our own people on these sites. We're not relying on other operators or some of our customers to operate our equipment and call us and say, there's something wrong. And, you got to run down there. For a lot of stuff we do, it's, we're there and we're monitoring power, ahead of time so we can foresee problems. But again, yeah, there's always changes. The best thing you can do is be prepared and kind of play out all those scenarios and have some extra equipment just in case.
Just absolutely agree with that. Having the additional redundancy, talk to a lot of people in the event space, and often there's if there is grid, they have the grid, they have a generator, they have a battery, and then an additional generator just in case. So lots of redundancy. And then secondly, what you said about the data and the monitoring piece. I mean, that's huge, and that's come a long way from where it used to be. I remember speaking to a guy who used to run the old Glastonbury music festivals in the UK, and his version of remote monitoring was to watch the exhaust pipe on the secondary generator. And if he saw the flap go up in a cloud of smoke, that meant the initial generator had gone down and he needed to go and see what was going on. So that was remote monitoring back in the late 90s to what we have today with like advanced, not just collecting data, but also AI to tell you what problems might be coming down the pipe.
Definitely. Looking forward to the future of temporary, reliable, scalable power. With that, actually, Josh, where can people find you? Like, what's next for you? What's next for CES? And is there a URL where people can connect with you?
Yeah, our website, CSPower.com, we're actually refreshing it as we speak. We're really updating it with kind of our new divisions and our global presence and everything. So we're excited about that in the next little bit here. And me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active from that standpoint, and, working with ARA and, some of the associations in Europe as well. So yeah, really, love the industry, love the people in it, love networking. So yeah, LinkedIn's a good place to find me, and, love always talking about, everything rental, technology, sustainability, live events. We live it every day, right? But we love what we do too. So it's exciting time, and, we have a great team at CES, and yeah, I'm excited about the future. We're branching out. We're, pedal to the metal kind of globally. And we think the next few years are going to be super exciting.
Have to agree 100%. Whatever platform you're on, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, do all of those good things. And if you want to learn more, we'll have links to everything that Josh just mentioned, CESPower.com, his LinkedIn as well. Those will all be in the show notes, or you can just go visit leadingthecharge.io. Our legal team wants me to say that any statements or views expressed by the hosts or guests on Leading the Charge are entirely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of POWR2, their partners or affiliates. And a big thank you to you, Josh, for joining us. So great to have you here, and thank you for sharing so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was great. Always fun. Enjoy it. Thanks
a lot, Josh. Really
bringing me on.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Wonderful. And thank you. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending even just a little bit of that time with us. So let's simplify sustainability and keep leading the charge toward a world powered by sustainable energy. See you next time.